My name is Andrew Carter, and in the spring of 2007, I decided to spend a few weeks in Germany as a solo trip before my summer session began at the University of Minnesota. I remember the date quite clearly, May 14th, 2007, because it was the day I landed in Berlin after an exhausting flight from Minneapolis. My plan was to tour some historic sites and unwind before resuming my junior year coursework back home. I had managed to save just enough money for a budget hotel on the outskirts of the city. The trouble started almost immediately. The taxi driver from the airport was oddly inquisitive, to the point it made me uneasy. He asked about my family, whether I was traveling alone, and the exact details of my itinerary, where I was going next, the times I planned to be out, and so on. I tried to remain polite yet vague, offering only general answers. Something in his tone felt unnatural, as if he was fishing for specific information. Even the quiet moments between his questions felt uneasy. By the time we finally arrived at my hotel, my head was spinning with doubt. The hotel itself was a rundown structure, far less appealing than the online photos had led me to believe. The lobby lights flickered from time to time, giving the entire reception area a dull, washed-out look. The one bright spot was the security guard who greeted me at the entrance. He was a tall, friendly man in a crisp uniform. I never caught his name, but his smile and accommodating manner made me feel a bit more comfortable, almost enough to forget the unsettling taxi ride. That first evening, I went out to grab some dinner from a nearby cafe. When I returned, the lobby was nearly empty, and the hall to my room was dimly lit. As I approached the elevator, I noticed someone standing by the door of my room. I could not make out his face clearly. He was wearing what looked like a black scarf or a simple mask over his mouth, and he had his hood pulled low over his forehead. He seemed to be fiddling with my doorknob. I froze for a moment, instinctively stepping back into the shadows. When he suddenly turned, as if sensing me, I ducked behind the corner. My heart thumped so hard I could hear it in my ears. I waited a few seconds, controlling my breathing, then slowly peered around the corner. He was still there, jiggling the handle, trying to get in. Gathering a shred of courage, I approached. The moment he spotted me, he took off running down the hall. I called out to him, demanding to know what he was doing, but he vanished into the stairwell. Shaken, I hurried down to find the security guard, the same kind man from earlier. I explained everything I had seen he offered to have and told me he would check the floors, but I could tell by his flat response that he might not be taking me seriously. It was a brush-off, or so it felt. I returned to my room and triple-checked the lock. The next night, I had trouble sleeping. I stayed up reviewing my class schedule for the upcoming summer term, trying to distract myself. Around 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of hushed voices in the hallway. My body went rigid with a sudden wave of fear. I slid out of bed as quietly as possible, tiptoed to the door, and peered through the peephole. To my shock, I recognized 2 figures, the kind security guard and the same man in the mask from the night before. They were whispering, gesturing occasionally at my door. My first instinct was to call the front desk. The receptionist answered in a sleepy, mildly annoyed voice. I tried to stay calm, but my voice trembled as I explained there were 2 men outside my room, one of whom was definitely not a guest, and the other was supposed to be hotel security. The receptionist told me to remain in my room while he came up to check. I waited, feeling helpless. Then the voices outside went silent. Moments later, there was a faint knock, which quickly turned into more forceful pounding. I could feel my knees weaken, uncertain if it was safe to open the door. Eventually, I heard someone calling my name. I risked another glance through the peephole. It was the receptionist, alone. I unlatched the door and quickly explained what had happened. He assured me that there was only one security guard on duty that night, and he was currently in the office. The receptionist led me downstairs, where I indeed found a security guard at the desk. But it was a completely different man than the one who had greeted me so kindly the day before. In fact, this guard claimed he had been on duty all evening and had not left the office area. The hotel manager, who had been woken by the commotion, alerted the police. When they arrived, I told them my story, but there was little they could do since the masked man and the so-called security guard were nowhere to be found. The hotel's surveillance system, I learned, was in the middle of an upgrade, so no footage existed from the previous 2 days. The officers took my statement, checked the premises, and left, apologizing for not being able to provide more immediate help. The following morning, I checked out early and moved to a different hotel across town. The entire experience left me on edge for the remainder of my stay in Berlin. Even now, I replay the details in my mind, especially that moment when I realized the polite guard I had trusted on my first day did not actually work there. No official name tag, no record of employment, nothing. Yet he had complete access to the building, even the staff-only areas. I still do not know what they wanted from me that night, whether it was money, some personal information, or something else entirely. The police never contacted me with updates, and as far as I am aware, no arrests were made. I returned to Minnesota a week later, diving back into my summer courses and trying to put the episode behind me. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I find myself picturing that masked man in the hallway. I can still see him silhouetted against the dim corridor light, twisting my doorknob as if he fully expected it to open. I suppose the most unsettling part is knowing that someone inside that hotel, someone posing as staff, was willing to help him. Even after all these years, I shudder to think how easily I could have opened the door at the wrong moment. And there is no proof of any of it beyond my own recollection, only the memories that remain far too vivid for comfort. I live in a fairly quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, and until last year, I never really worried about crime in my area. But something happened in March 2023 that completely changed how I felt whenever I heard my doorbell ring. That Friday afternoon was typical enough. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, so I was sitting at my dining table, finishing up a project. It was around 2 p.m. when the bell rang. I remember thinking it was odd. I wasn't expecting any deliveries, but packages show up unexpectedly all the time these days, so I got up to check. Through the glass panel on my front door, I saw someone dressed like a delivery man. He held a medium-sized box and one of those handheld devices you see delivery workers carry. I opened the door, and he gave me a friendly nod, saying something about how he needed a photo for proof of delivery. He claimed it was a new procedure his shipping company was trying out. The recipient had to stand with the package outside so the house number was visible in the background. I felt a twinge of doubt, but I didn't see any real danger in stepping onto my porch for a quick picture. So, I took the box, stepped out, and waited for him to snap the shot. But as soon as I was on the porch, I noticed a flicker of movement near the side of my house. Before I could react, 2 more men emerged. One grabbed me by the shoulder, the other pushed me forward. My first instinct was to shout or go back, but they had me in a tight grip. They ushered me back through the doorway into my own house. The moment we were inside, the delivery guy slammed the door shut. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it. I tried to twist free, maybe get to my phone, but one of them threw a punch that hit me hard in the stomach. I doubled over, struggling to breathe. They dragged me into the living room, all 3 towering over me. One demanded money, while another kept watch on the front window. I couldn't see their faces clearly. Each wore a cap or a hood, and they moved so fast I couldn't memorize their features. I remember trying to fight back, at least a little. Adrenaline surged, and I managed to swing at one of them. I clipped his arm, which only seemed to irritate him. He struck me across the face, sending me reeling into the coffee table. My vision went fuzzy at the edges, and I could taste blood in my mouth. My ears rang as they tore through my drawers, flipping couch cushions and rummaging through the cabinets. At one point, I tried crawling away, but a heavy boot pressed down on my back. When I tried to resist, a second kick landed squarely against my ribs. Pain shot through my chest, and everything started to fade. The next thing I remember, I was staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, except for a faint buzzing from the TV that had been knocked on, but left with static. My head hurt, my lip was split, and every breath felt like fire in my ribs. I slowly pulled myself up, dizzy and weak. I stumbled to the kitchen to grab my phone from the counter. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. I had barely gotten out a few words. I'd been attacked when my voice broke and I slumped against the wall. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay on the line, to remain calm. When the police arrived, they moved through the house, checking each room carefully. But the three men were long gone. My living room was a mess. Drawers had been ripped open, pictures thrown around, and a few electronics I had lying out. My work laptop, my headphones, were all gone. A couple of officers helped me sit down and asked if I needed an ambulance. I nodded because I was still feeling lightheaded and the pain in my ribs suggested I might have a fracture. But before heading to the hospital, I explained the entire story. The officers asked if I had any security cameras. Thankfully, I had installed a doorbell camera months ago after a neighbor's car was broken into. I never thought I'd need it for something like this. The footage showed the first guy posing as a delivery man, me stepping outside, and then the two other men appearing from off camera. It didn't capture the whole attack inside the house, but it was enough to identify them later. The police took my statement at the hospital while I waited to get x-rays. I remember feeling so frustrated and violated, trying to piece together every detail for the officers, what they were wearing, how tall they might have been, and any tattoos or scars I could recall. But my memories were jumbled, and the entire ordeal had happened so fast. Over the next few days, I stayed with a friend while I waited for an update from the police. They eventually told me they had caught 3 suspects matching the description on the footage. One of them was wearing the same jacket he had on in the video. The police were confident they had the right guys, but when it came to recovering my stolen items, my laptop, headphones, and a small amount of cash I kept in a drawer, nothing turned up. These men might have ditched everything or passed it off to someone else. The police said this kind of thing is common. The items get fenced quickly, making it impossible to trace. It left me feeling uneasy, knowing my personal belongings were out there somewhere, probably being sold to strangers. I've since changed all my passwords, locked down my accounts, and upgraded my security system. My doorbell camera now connects to my phone, so I can see who's outside before I even consider opening the door. Friends and family have all pitched in their support, but the sense of security I once had is gone. Today, I still jump whenever the doorbell rings unexpectedly. Sometimes I imagine a stranger in a uniform, ready to lure me outside again. I keep replaying that moment when I stepped over the threshold, wishing I just said no thanks and closed the door. I realize how easily anyone can become a target. But the worst part, even though the men were caught, the police couldn't trace my laptop or other valuables. A lot of personal information was stored on that device, and the idea that it could be floating around in some back alley sale is terrifying. What else did they see or copy while they had it in their hands? I'm trying to move on, but a piece of me keeps waiting for the phone call that the police found my belongings, or for an alert that someone tried to log into my accounts. Will I ever hear from those men again? Or did they pass along my information to someone else? Before we dive into the next story, If you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. In February 2004, I was a sophomore at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, majoring in psychology. Back then, I shared a modest off-campus apartment with two roommates, Mark and Dennis, both of whom were also students at UMass. We rented a cramped space above a small convenience store just a few blocks from campus. I spent most of my time juggling a full class load and an evening shift at a local bookstore. Life felt hectic, but it was a controlled kind of chaos. I was on track to finish the semester strong, focusing on my coursework and making enough money to pay rent and keep a bit of spending money in my pocket. Around the first week of February, the campus mood took a dark turn. News started spreading that a fellow student named Maura Murray had vanished. Maura was a nursing student, though some said she had recently switched programs, who also happened to be on the track team. I only knew her casually, mostly by sight, because we had mutual friends. In a place as large as UMass Amherst, it was normal to pass people in hallways or dining halls and exchange brief nods or smiles, even if you never formally met. But hearing that someone who walked the same campus paths I did had disappeared was unsettling. At the time, I recall that we were just coming off the stress of our first midterm exams. My midterms were spread out over 2 weeks, some in large lecture halls, others in smaller classrooms. I'd wrap up my shift at the bookstore by 9 p.m., then spend late nights poring over notes. By early February, things had calmed down academically, so I was hoping for a bit of a breather. Instead, the news about Maura hit like a shockwave, rippling through campus conversation. Maura went missing on February 9th, 2004. That's a date I remember clearly because I had just finished an evening shift when I heard people whispering about some sort of emergency. Rumors circulated that Maura had emailed her professors, saying she had a family emergency and needed to take time away. Then she withdrew money from an ATM, got into her car, a black Saturn sedan, and left campus. At first, it just seemed like an odd story, a student taking off unexpectedly. The situation escalated quickly when we found out her car was discovered in New Hampshire. Word spread that Maura had been involved in a single-vehicle accident on Route 112 in Haverhill. Locals reported seeing her at the crash site, describing her as shaken but seemingly not severely injured. By the time law enforcement arrived on the scene, she was gone, leaving her car locked or partially locked, depending on the account. No footprints, no note, no phone calls, simply gone. Those details, especially the abruptness, rattled everyone. We'd heard of students dropping out or even vanishing for a weekend party spree, but never something that led to a full-blown missing person investigation. Campus reaction was immediate and intense. Within a day or two, bulletin boards near lecture halls, coffee shops in downtown Amherst, and library corkboards were plastered with missing person flyers. Her family drove from out of state to search the Haverhill area. The university police coordinated with local New Hampshire law enforcement. Despite all the effort, the details remained hazy. No conclusive evidence explained why Maura had gone to New Hampshire or what happened after the crash. Friends of Maura described her as disciplined, both academically and athletically. They said she was on the track team, known for early morning runs and an unwavering commitment to practice. She also had a part-time job on campus, which made the circumstances of her disappearance even more bewildering. Who would abandon classes, a job, and a sports team, especially in the middle of a semester? Some speculated she might have been overwhelmed by personal issues. Others whispered about relationship troubles. A handful suggested darker possibilities, like foul play, although no one had proof. I remember attending a gathering in a crowded lecture hall where volunteers tried to organize searches. Students, staff, and even a few residents discussed carpooling to New Hampshire on the weekends to comb through wooded areas, check with businesses, and hand out flyers. I debated going one weekend, but I had midterms coming up again soon, and I was still working evenings at the bookstore. Yet, the urge to help was strong. There's a certain disbelief you feel when someone from your own community just vanishes. It's not supposed to happen in a well-populated college town, much less under such mysterious circumstances. Mara's family set up a base of operations in the area near the crash site. They coordinated with volunteers, sometimes enduring harsh New England winter weather, snow and ice that made searching difficult. Law enforcement brought in tracking dogs, but reports varied on whether they picked up a trail. Some said the dogs lost her scent a short distance from the car. Others mentioned contradictory timelines about the last sightings. Meanwhile, rumors circulated throughout campus with each passing week. Some claimed to have spotted Mara in nearby towns, though those sightings were never confirmed. A few people talked about an unknown individual who might have offered her a ride. Others insisted that she'd planned to disappear, referencing a cryptic note found in her dorm room or a conversation she had with a close friend about needing to get away. These rumors merged into a swirl of speculation that made it hard to separate fact from fiction. In my psychology classes, I became fascinated and admittedly disturbed by how easily rumors gained momentum. Professor Klein, who taught our social psychology course, highlighted how collective stress or fear could lead people to embrace unproven theories. Some believed Mora was a victim of a random crime, perhaps encountering the wrong person at the wrong time after the car accident. Others suggested she staged the entire scenario to start a new life elsewhere. Neither scenario had definitive evidence, yet both found supporters. I spent many evenings in my apartment poring over newspaper clippings and local news websites. My roommates and I would gather around our old TV, hoping for an update during the nightly newscast. We'd talk in circles about the same questions. Did Mora plan to leave, or was she forced? Was the crashed car staged, or just an unfortunate accident followed by a tragic event? There was no conclusion, just a collective frustration at the lack of answers.